Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Thursday, January 19th. I don't know if there's anything significant about that date, but here we are. We looking forward to another conversation today.
True. We get to talk about Bitcoin again today, which is one of our favorite topics.
That is one of our favorite topics. What's going on today, Kim?
Oh gosh, every time you ask this, I never have an answer. Not a whole lot. That's always my answer. Not a ton. I feel some forward motion, and so I don't know how to define that clearly, but I'm feeling some movement, and so that's awesome. Excited to get into this conversation.
Yeah. What's going on in the markets?
So if you've been following at all, the markets have been significantly up since last week. Things are starting to look green. Maybe there's a crypto spring in sight after this long winter. Bitcoin is just above even over 24 hours, but up 16% over the last week, hanging just below 21,000. Ethereum is up down 0.75% over 24 hours, but still up 10.5% over 7 days. It's hanging out at $1,533. Our biggest mover in the top 100 coins is number 98, so just barely made the mark. This is Kava or Kava. I don't know how you'd say it. Kava. It's up 11.5% over 24 hours and over 38% in 7 days, which is that looks like great steady movement to me. Sometimes you see like it's up 100% in 24 hours and it's up 100% over 7 days, which is just fast movement that doesn't usually hold. Anyway, Kava is sitting at $1.02 per token. It's a decentralized blockchain that combines the speed and interoperability of Cosmos with the developer power Ethereum. So here we go. It's yet another bridge.
Yeah, and I was looking at their chart. They've got about 30 days of steady growth. So, yeah, it's still down quite a bit from its all-time highs, but yeah, at least in the recent time, they've been having some pretty steady movement. That's great.
Sweet. What are we talking about today, Josh?
Well, this whole conversation, I mean, most of our conversations, if it's around crypto, it's going to be around Bitcoin, is by far our favorite of the cryptocurrencies. Not that we don't also appreciate some other ones and see value in them, but Bitcoin is sort of the leader of the pack. A lot of things follow it, and we just particularly enjoy that coin.
Mm-hmm. If I'm going to put my opinion out there, which I am, I feel like I have liberty to do that since it's our podcast.
That's right.
I would call Bitcoin the king crypto, and it is like the one that is truly operating as a currency.
Yeah.
So that's really why we're such supporters of it. It really is something that can change the trajectory of a current financial system that is broken.
Yeah.
And that's why we're backing Bitcoin.
Very true.
No.
Yeah. And again, anything we say, we're not financial advisors. This is just simply our opinion. Do your own research.
That's true.
Make your own choices. This is just happens to be our opinion of what's going on. But yeah, like Kim mentioned, Bitcoin being the king crypto, the one that's functioning as a currency, that's kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about today. And we've touched on these subjects before, but recently we came across a fairly well-written article about Bitcoin detangling from the dollar. And that's something we've talked about even early on, even before we had the podcast. Kim and I had an office together where we were working and we were tracking crypto. And I remember Kim had her prices set on her charting to like
Mhm.
to Bitcoin instead of to the dollar. So it was
Mhm.
like if you're looking at, Ethereum or the Binance coin or Cardano or whatever, it showed its value in reference to Bitcoin, not in reference to the dollar. And I just remember her saying, like, if I really believe Bitcoin is the currency of the future, I want my brain to start to see value in terms of Bitcoin, not in terms of Bitcoin measured against the dollar.
Mhm.
And that's what this article was about. The whole article was about how that was the original intent for Bitcoin, and that we need to keep that focus, or we're losing some of what makes Bitcoin Bitcoin if we're constantly trying to make it the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, just personally, again, I think we're kind of missing the point if we continue to measure everything against the dollar. If we don't
Mm,
think the dollar is the currency that we'll be measuring or be dealing in for the rest of our lives, or if even in short term, long term, whatever, if we know where we're going, we need to start measuring by that. This is
yeah.
my opinion. And it came from a conviction that I had personally. I'm not asking anybody to take my own conviction, but this is where it came from was, hey, I've shown you this. This is what the Lord was talking to me about. Hey, I've shown you this. Why aren't you actually looking at things in these terms instead of looking at um what everyone else is measuring things against? And it kind of hit me hard. I feel
Mm,
like I keep getting these nudges. We talked about, when was it? I don't know that it was in October. Was it October when we were in South Africa? And we just got real convicted about not focusing on Bitcoin.
mm,
And it came from a conversation with a friend of ours. And it really like reignited that passion for Bitcoin and the potential of what Bitcoin can do in a global economy, in a global financial system.
yeah. Yeah. So I want to read a couple comments from this article, and we can just kind of play off of that. So the first one that really stood out to me was, but Bitcoin was not created to match the dollar. It was created to empower people to become financially free of centralized banking system that had let the world down. And I just was really struck by that because it's very similar to conversations we've had, things we've talked about on the show, but just how, yeah, we've talked about this too, but like trying not to make the new look like the old. And in some regard, if you're only using Bitcoin as an investment tool or seeing it as that, then you're trying to make the new look like the old,
Mm-hmm.
when really the opportunity exists within Bitcoin to break free from a system. And
Right.
yes, stepping into another system, but that's how the world functions. We function in a world of systems, in a world of structures. And so it's not that we're against the structure or the system, but that we want to see improvement and growth and evolution of that into a more free system.
Absolutely. Um, I loved this quote from this. It was actually a friend of ours. Actually, I'm just going to call her out. Melise shared this with us a few days ago. And I was like sitting on my couch and like cheering to myself reading this article because it's the things that we've been talking about. It's the things that we've been thinking, feeling about Bitcoin. And the reason that it's created, like it's almost just been kind of put into the flow of everything else in the current financial system. And though
Mm,
it's being adopted and recognized as something that is worth trading, it's kind of been marginalized into this yet another investment tool, like you were saying. And that's
mm,
not the point. Like
Yeah.
the whole premise of this, if you want to go look up the white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto about Bitcoin when this was developed and or invented or released, whatever you want to call it, you'll see the manifesto that is associated with Bitcoin and the reason it was made. And a lot of it was attributed to the 2008 financial crisis,
Mhm.
the huge crash that happened globally, and saying, hey, something isn't working. There has to be something better. And so he made something better. And so when we just sweep it into the same category as everything else, we kind of negate its original intent.
Mhm.
And I don't, if you've been listening to us for a while, we're all about original intent. I
That's true.
actually believe that the Father is leading us back to a lot of origins in a lot of ways, with food, with health, with spirituality, with finances. And
Mm.
I think he's releasing a lot of this back into the world. And this is why you see people like with their eyes opening up. People, it's been said for, I don't know, years now, like there's this awakening that's happening. And this is why we call ourselves mystics. And it's because he's starting to reveal these mysteries that have either just gone unnoticed, maybe knowingly ignored, I don't know, or maybe they just haven't been revealed before. But he's doing this and he's doing it on a global scale.
Yeah.
And I think with us, like you either catch that wave or you watch it go by, right?
Mhm.
And this is us trying to catch the wave. If he's sending it our way, we're going.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, so you mentioned a quote from it that you really liked. Like what?
It was that you read. It was that Bitcoin was not created to match the dollar.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
created to empower people to become financially free of a
Mhm.
centralized banking system that has let the world down. And I
Yeah.
think all of those things are such good points.
Yeah.
Um, it really is taking finances back into your own hands and not leaving it to someone else. It
Mhm.
really is getting out from this system of relying on the middleman. Um, I
Yeah.
mean, there are things that we don't even think of, you don't even question or second guess. Like I walk around, if I have cash on me, I walk around with the US dollar, which is a note from the central bank that says, I owe you this value, but it's
Mhm.
not actually the money. It is like an IOU that we just trade around.
Yeah.
And the central bank is continually holding that value. We don't even actually get to hold it. And it is just this, it's a system that we've all just accepted because we were kind of born into it.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, kind of the nuts and bolts of it, it's like, that really doesn't feel right. I am a responsible adult. I can handle my own finances.
Well, towards the end of the article, it starts talking about what is a fiat currency. And I thought that was really interesting because the definition of it was a fiat currency is one that is not backed by reserves, but by the confidence of the issuer.
Mm,
So our dollar bill is backed by the confidence of the central bank, the Federal Reserve, and in large part confidence of America as a country. And that value fluctuates compared to um, other fiat currencies, other reserves constantly.
mhm,
We're just not aware of it because it's the measuring tool that we use. So, there's a lot of people right now talking about the price of eggs. And so it's not that even though the value of the dollar has changed, we perceive it as the value of eggs have changed
mhm,
because the dollar is our measuring tool.
right.
And what we are proposing, what this article is proposing, is to some degree start shifting your mindset towards seeing Bitcoin as the measuring tool because then its price doesn't fluctuate its price doesn't fluctuate. It's one Bitcoin. One Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. Its tradable value with other assets changes. And but it's always one Bitcoin or one Satoshi or whatever, you want to talk about.
Mhm.
But I thought, that comment was interesting because then it goes on to say in 1933, the US government stopped exchanging gold for dollars with citizens. And then in 1971, stopped allowing foreign nations to exchange gold for dollars. So it's purely based on the confidence of the issuer. And by that same token, Bitcoin is a fiat currency because but instead of being issued by the central bank and the Fed, it's issued by the Bitcoin blockchain.
Mhm.
And it's decentralized largely, and um, its trust isn't in Coinbase, it's not in Satoshi Nakamoto, it's not in Binance, it's in the actual blockchain. And as
Mhm.
long as there are users who are participating in the ecosystem, it remains decentralized and run by the ecosystem. And so, in some regards, it's very much so a currency, and it's very much so a fiat currency like we are used to using.
Mhm.
The and then that article is kind of talking about like what is a currency, and it says there's three metrics that they look for. It's reasonable limit of supply, verifiability, and broad acceptance. And so we were just sort of looking into, well, does Bitcoin fit those things? And when you have reasonable limit on supply, Bitcoin will never have more than 21 million Bitcoin. It's just how it was created to function. It will only be that amount. So there is a reasonable limit that will never be changed. There is verifiability because of the way it functions on the blockchain, requires authentication, requires verification for it to even process. And in some regard, I would argue there is broad acceptance because it has a
Mm.
$400 billion market cap. That's a pretty significant amount of money to be invested in an asset. There are over 100 million unique owners. It's hard to be specific with it because sometimes it can be hard to tell. Some of the things we saw were like over 200 million wallets, but I have 3 or 4 Bitcoin wallets, and so it's hard to
Same.
tell exactly how many unique users it is, but somewhere around 100 million is estimated. There are over 800,000 wallets that hold a minimum of 1 Bitcoin.
Wow.
And Kim found this study in 2021 that found 22% of the adult population in the US owns Bitcoin. That's pretty broad acceptance. Like that's
Yes.
that's people utilizing the platform, utilizing the technology. And so, yeah, I think my heart is just like, yes, Bitcoin is a um, is a currency, but only if we see it and use it in that way. If we're only using it to then exchange back to the US dollar, then no, it will never be anything more than an investment vehicle. But if you start to shift your mind into transacting in Bitcoin, then yeah, I think the potential for it is insane.
Absolutely. I was gonna propose the same idea. Like, just let me propose a shift of mindset. Like, it
Mm,
doesn't have to be some huge thing. Now you buy everything in Bitcoin. You don't ever look at the US dollar. That's not what I'm saying, but maybe shifting a little bit. Set one of the things that you use to track the price of cryptocurrency into measuring by Bitcoin. You can even look at them side by side and start learning how to translate it or how to decipher it in your own brain to make it make
mhm,
sense. But I will tell you, I still don't do this all the time. But when I have things measured in Bitcoin, so when I look at like Coinbase or not Coinbase, CoinGecko, which is where I look at current prices of coins and market caps and all that. When I shift that to measure in Bitcoin, it looks so much different. And I really think that if you are down with the new financial system, if you see Bitcoin as being an answer, or even just cryptocurrency, I just challenge you to shift one of those metrics that you use. Just shift one of them to measure in Bitcoin and see how your brain responds, how you might start getting a little more comfortable with looking at it not measured against the US dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. And like Kim said, it takes time. It's an adjustment of your brain. It's something that we have. Okay, well, we said that article showed that the US dollar became fiat in for citizens in 1933. I would argue that that probably predates any of our listeners, or the majority of our
Probably.
listeners. So, anyone who's listening to this, you grew up in a system of only knowing this. And so asking you to change that is a huge ask and is a crazy mental pattern to break. But I think it can be done slowly, and just even if it's just by looking at other cryptos as a value of Bitcoin, it's a start. Like
Mhm.
starting to read the chart, like it's kind of interesting when you pull up the chart of Bitcoin or of cryptos and you measure it against Bitcoin, how Bitcoin changes its price from, you know, 20,800 something to 1, and then its chart from going up and down just goes flat because it becomes the measuring stick against which we measure. So it
Mhm.
becomes the constant. And yeah, it's just a pattern that you have to break the one you're in and start to learn to see the pattern from another way.
It's true. I would propose that it's similar to learning another language. Truly. We've as Americans, we've always measured everything in dollars, right? And as an American in middle America, I've only ever been fluent in one language, English.
Right.
I admire those people who know multiple languages. Truly, I think it is a gift. But if we look at this kind of like learning a new language, in the beginning, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but you start learning a couple things that you recognize and you can pick out of a sentence or you can repeat and reproduce.
Mm.
And at some point, it all starts making sense. And then at some point, I heard in my high school French class, I heard that once you start dreaming in that other language, that's when you're truly fluent.
Mm.
But once we start actually, like, even just dipping your toe in and measuring things against Bitcoin instead of against the dollar, it's like shifting a language. So once we start doing it more and more, you might actually start seeing other things. You might actually start dreaming in Bitcoin as opposed to dreaming in the dollar.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Mm.
All right. Well, dream in Bitcoin, and we'll see you guys on Monday.
See ya. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.